There's a place in your heart, and I know.
They sang the songs that made America dance. They wore the suits, smiled for the cameras, and filled stadiums from Detroit to London. But behind the spotlight, 10 of Motown's biggest stars were signing their lives away in ink they couldn't read between the lines of.
Better world, to make a better world.
Royalty checks that never came. Songwriting credits that vanished overnight. Mansions repossessed while their hits still played on every radio in the country. Some died broke in rented rooms. Others spent decades in courtrooms trying to claim what they wrote with their own hands.
Ain't no river wide enough, baby.
Tonight, 10 Motown contracts that didn't just break careers, they ruined lives. And number 1 will leave you speechless. Number 10, Mary Wells. We start with the woman they called the Queen of Motown before Diana Ross ever stepped to a microphone.
Take my hand to my guy.
In 1964, her voice was everywhere. My Guy had just knocked the Beatles off the top of the charts at the height of Beatlemania.
I know I had some faith that every day could play.
She was 21 years old, touring with the Fab Four themselves, the most valuable artist Berry Gordy owned, but that contract she'd signed at 17 had a clause she didn't understand. It would expire on her 21st birthday, and when it did, Mary Wells discovered something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She had no savings, no publishing rights, no ownership of the master recordings generating fortunes every week. Her royalty rate was a fraction of industry standard, and even that fraction had been reduced by recoupable expenses she'd never been told about. Studio time, wardrobe, hotel rooms from tours where she'd headlined sold-out arenas. Every dollar Motown spent on Mary Wells had been quietly added to a tab she was paying off with her own hits. When her lawyers tried to renegotiate, Gordy refused, so Mary walked. She signed with 20th Century Fox for a bigger advance and immediately discovered the second half of the trap. Motown owned her catalog. Every song people associated with her, including My Guy, belonged to a company she no longer worked for. Her career stalled within 18 months. By the 70s, she was performing in small clubs for fractions of what she'd once earned.
I gave my guy my word of honor.
She battled throat cancer in the late 80s with no health insurance and a voice that was disappearing.
My guy.
She died at 52 in 1992, the Queen of Motown buried with almost nothing to her name. But what happened to our next artist somehow is even more disturbing.
I'm sticking to my guy like a stamp to a
Number 9, Florence Ballard, the founding member of the Supremes. The girl with the biggest voice in the group, the one who named them. The one who held everything together when Diana Ross was still just a backup singer named Diane. And by the time she was 32 years old, she was on welfare in Detroit, raising 3 daughters in a house with no heat. How does that happen to one of the most famous singers in the world? The contract. When Berry Gordy pushed her out of the group in 1967, the paperwork she signed on the way out the door finished her. She received a settlement of around $15,000 after years of generating millions for the label. She was prohibited from ever calling herself a former Supreme in promotional material. She lost all rights to royalties. Publishing on hits she had sung lead vocals on went to Jabati, Motown's publishing arm, forever. Florence tried a solo career on ABC Records, but her Motown contract contained non-compete language she didn't fully understand. Promotion was blocked. Radio play was discouraged through back channels. Her single failed. Her marriage collapsed. Her lawyer, the same one who had negotiated her exit, allegedly mishandled what little money she had left. By 1971, the woman whose voice had launched the Supremes was applying for food stamps. She told a Detroit newspaper she had no idea where her money had gone. She was 28 years old. She tried a comeback in 1975. The crowd gave her a standing ovation that lasted minutes. People wept. There was talk of a new record deal. 3 months later, Florence Ballard was dead of cardiac arrest at 32. Her funeral was attended by thousands. The Supreme who had named the group was buried in a plot her family could barely afford. But the contract that destroyed her looks almost gentle compared to what happened to number 8.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and the real stories behind the music that built the world we live in. Don't miss the next one. We will see you there. Back to the countdown.
Number 8, David Ruffin, the voice of the Temptations.
It's not that I don't love you.
The man who sang My Girl and turned it into one of the most recognizable vocal performances in American music history. And the contract he signed in 1964 didn't just cost him money.
I know it's gonna take everything I've got.
It cost him his life. Here's what almost nobody understands about how Motown structured the Temptations. The group was signed as a unit. 5 men, 1 contract, 1 royalty pool, split equally regardless of who sang lead.
And it's nothing about.
David Ruffin, whose distinctive rasp drove the group's biggest crossover hits, was earning the same percentage as members who sang background harmonies on the same records.
It's just a.
When he asked for renegotiation in 1968, when he asked for the group to be renamed David Ruffin and the Temptations, the way Diana Ross and the Supremes had been restructured, the answer was no. He was fired in June of 1968, and his solo contract, The Consolation, contained terms that were arguably worse. His advance was small, his promotional budget was smaller. He was prohibited from performing Temptations material under his own name. The catalogue he'd built belonged to a corporation he no longer worked with. My Whole World Ended hit the top 10.
That even I don't understand.
But the structure of his deal meant that even hit records generated almost no income for him personally after recoupable expenses were deducted.
So I'm leaving.
David began using cocaine in the early 70s. By the 80s, the addiction was destroying him. He performed when he could, slept on couches when he couldn't, and watched as Motown reissued Temptations compilations that generated millions while he struggled to pay rent. In 1991, David Ruffin died of a crack cocaine overdose in a Philadelphia hospital. He had less than $50 in his pocket. The voice on My Girl was silenced at 50 years old. But the next artist on our list, what they did to her, crossed a line even the music industry usually doesn't cross. Number 7, Tammi Terrell, the duet partner who made Marvin Gaye sound like he was singing to the love of his life on records like Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
If you need me, call me, no matter where you are.
And the contract she signed at 20 years old gave her almost nothing in return for becoming half of one of the most beloved vocal pairings in soul music history. Tammy's deal was structured as a standard developmental artist contract, the kind Motown gave to performers they were uncertain about. The royalty rate was low, around 2% of wholesale.
No hurry, you don't have to worry, 'cause baby,
Recoupable expenses were aggressive, and critically, when she was paired with Marvin Gaye, those records were credited to Marvin first and Tammi second, with revenue splits that favored him heavily. She was, on paper, a featured artist on her own hits. The songs she's most famous for generated a fraction of the income for her that they did for Marvin and for the company. But the contract didn't just cost her money, it cost her medical care when she needed it most. In October of 1967, while performing with Marvin Gaye at Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia, Tammi collapsed on stage and fell into his arms. The diagnosis was a brain tumor.
I told you could always count on me, darling.
She underwent 8 surgeries over the next 3 years, and during that time, the question of who would pay for her treatment became a horrifying revelation about how Motown handled its artists.
that day on, I made a vow I'll be
She had no comprehensive health insurance through the label. Her family bore the cost of much of her care.
rolling up. Ain't no real
Motown released duet records during her illness that featured her vocals overlaid with Valerie Simpson's because Tammi was too sick to record. Those records sold.
baby, there ain't no mountain high enough.
The royalties were still calculated under the original contract terms. Tammi Terrell died on March 16, 1970, at 24 years old.
Baby, there ain't no mountain high enough.
The contract that had paid her pennies on the dollar continued generating revenue for decades after her death.
You, baby. Oh, no.
And what comes next, the story of number 6, is one of the most calculated contractual betrayals in music history.
Mountain high enough. Ain't no
Number 6, the Marvelettes, the girls who gave Motown its first ever #1 record, Please Mr. Postman, released in 1961, was the song that put Berry Gordy's company on the map. And the 5 teenage girls who recorded it walked away from Motown with almost nothing to show for the song that built the empire.
Whoa, yeah. Please, please.
Gladys Horton, Wanda Young, Georgiana Tillman, Catherine Anderson, and Juanita Cowart had signed their contracts when they were still in high school. None of them had attorneys.
From my boyfriend so far away.
None of them had parents with experience in entertainment law. The deal they put their names to gave them a royalty rate that, after recoupable expenses, amounted to roughly 2 cents per record sold, split 5 ways. Please Mr. Postman sold over 1 million copies.
Is there a letter for me?
The math on what each girl actually received works out to less than what a part-time factory job would have paid them.
I'm standing here waiting, Mr. Postman. So
But the real damage came in the songwriting credits. Gladys Horton had contributed substantial arrangement ideas.
so patiently. For just the
Georgiana Tillman had helped develop the vocal harmonies that made the record distinctive. Neither received writing credit, neither received publishing royalties.
Oh, you better wait a minute, wait a minute. Please,
The credit went to Motown staff writers and the publishing went to Jobette.
if you turn it on to me, please, Mr. Postman.
Every time the song was licensed, for movies, for commercials, for the Beatles cover that introduced it to a global audience, that money flowed to the publisher.
Don't pass me by, you see the tears in my eyes, you better wait.
By the late 60s, the Marvelettes were essentially finished, replaced by the Supremes.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Georgiana Tillman developed sickle cell anemia and lupus and died in 1980 at 36 years old, broke. Wanda Young struggled with addiction and disappeared from public life for decades.
Oh, you better wait a minute, wait a minute.
Gladys Horton, the lead singer on Motown's first #1 record, lived for years in California with very little money, raising a disabled son largely on her own.
Oh, yeah.
She fought Motown for decades over royalties and won small victories that came too late. She died in 2011. Please Mr. Postman has never stopped earning.
Whoa, yeah.
The women who sang it just never saw most of it. And our number 5 spot, the story behind it, is so disturbing that for years, the artist himself refused to talk about it publicly.
You pass me by. You saw the tears stand.
Number 5, Marvin Gaye, most important male artist in Motown's history.
there to relieve me for the love you
The man who recorded What's Going On, an album so groundbreaking that Berry Gordy initially refused to release it.
give to me will free.
And the contract Marvin had been operating under is one of the most cited examples of how a label can financially trap even its biggest star.
If you don't know the thing you're dealing,
Marvin's deal had been renegotiated several times by the early 70s, but each renegotiation came with new recoupable advances that kept him perpetually in debt to the company.
love me, I need some loving.
By 1976, despite being one of the most successful recording artists in the world, Marvin Gaye was several $1 million in arrears to Motown. Every hit record he made was applied against that debt before he saw a dollar in royalties. He owed the IRS.
I can't hold it much longer.
He owed alimony to Anna Gordy, Berry's sister, who he had divorced in a settlement that gave her the royalties from his next album, the famously bitter Here My Dear. He moved to Europe in 1980 to escape his American creditors. He lived in Belgium in a tiny apartment, working on the album that would become Midnight Love and the song Sexual Healing.
Just grab a hold of my body and mind.
When that record exploded into a worldwide hit in 1982, Marvin should have finally been free. He wasn't. The layered advances, the cross-collateralized expenses, the publishing arrangements signed away years earlier,
Oh, baby, makes me feel so fine.
all of it meant that Sexual Healing generated income for him, but not nearly what a #2 pop hit should have generated.
Helps to really
He came home to Los Angeles in 1983, moving back into his parents' house. He was addicted to cocaine, he was paranoid.
know stability is deep in me.
He was certain that contractual obligations he didn't fully understand were going to swallow him for the rest of his life.
There is something I can do.
On April 1st, 1984, the day before his 45th birthday, Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his own father in that house.
There is something I can do.
He died with debts that exceeded the value of his estate. And what happens at number 4? You will not believe this happened to a child.
Healing, baby, is good.
Number 4, Stevie Wonder. Number 4, Little Stevie Wonder. He was 11 years old when he signed his first Motown contract. 11.
And for more than I love you.
A blind child from Saginaw, Michigan, with a voice and a musical instinct that anyone who heard him knew was generational.
But when he
And the agreement his mother and stepfather put their names to on his behalf is one of the starkest examples in music history of how the standard practices of the era treated child performers.
if love
Stevie's earnings under the original contract were placed into a trust that he could not access until his 21st birthday.
oh, may I touch your hand?
That sounds reasonable until you understand the details. The trust paid him a small weekly allowance throughout his teenage years, regardless of how many records he sold. Hits like Fingertips generated significant revenue for Motown. Stevie received pocket money. His tutors, his living expenses, his mother's support, his travel costs, all of it was charged against his account.
With God on our side.
By the time he was 18, despite having been a working professional for 7 years, the actual cash that Stevie Wonder personally controlled was minimal.
We'll find strength.
When he turned 21 in 1971, he discovered what was waiting for him. The trust contained roughly $1 million.
In each tear we cry.
For a decade of work as one of Motown's most consistent hitmakers, that was the total. He also discovered that his contract was about to expire and that he had no obligation to re-sign. So he didn't. He moved to New York. He hired new lawyers.
No, it will be.
He recorded Music of My Mind and Talking Book using his own money, refused to give Motown the masters, and demanded a renegotiation that gave him something almost no black artist in America had ever been given.
You and I really
Full creative control, higher royalty rates, ownership of his publishing. He got it, because by 1971, Motown couldn't afford to lose him. But the contract that had governed his childhood was the standard for nearly every other child performer Motown signed. The Jackson 5 signed a version of the same deal. Most of them never got the chance to renegotiate the way Stevie did. And he's why what happened to number 3 is so heartbreaking. Number 3, the Jackson 5. They walked into Motown in 1968 as the most exciting young group anyone had ever seen. Michael was 10, Marlon was 11, Jermaine was 13, Tito was 15, Jackie was 17. And the contract Joe Jackson signed on behalf of his sons on March 11, 1969, is one of the most analyzed and criticized agreements in entertainment history. The royalty rate was 6% of 90% of retail, which sounds modest, but was actually below industry standard for a group with their immediate commercial impact.
Get down, girl!
The Jackson 5 had 4 consecutive #1 singles their first year. I Want You Back, ABC The Love You Save, and I'll Be There sold tens of millions of copies combined. The publishing on those songs was assigned to Jobite. The masters were owned by Motown. The boys saw a fraction of what those records generated, and that fraction was further reduced by recoupable expenses that included everything from costumes to choreography to studio time. But the worst part of the contract was the creative restriction. The Jacksons wanted to write their own music. Michael, in particular, was developing as a songwriter by the time he was 13. Motown's policy at the time was that staff writers wrote the songs and artists performed them. When the Jackson brothers submitted material, it was rejected or shelved. They had no creative control. They had no ownership of their work. And by 1975, they were also in debt to the company under the same kind of cross-collateralized accounting that had trapped Marvin Gaye. They left for Epic Records in 1976. They had to surrender the name Jackson 5. Jermaine stayed behind because he had married Berry Gordy's daughter. The catalogue of music they had created from 1969 through 1975 remained the property of Motown. When Michael became the biggest pop star in the world a few years later, those early masters generated enormous reissue revenue. The Jacksons received standard artist royalties on those reissues. Not ownership, not publishing, and what comes next may have caused more direct human suffering than any other on this list. Number 2, the Funk Brothers. You have never heard of them by name. But you have heard them on more #1 records than the Beatles, the Beach Boys, the Rolling Stones, and Elvis Presley combined. They were the studio musicians who played on virtually every Motown hit from 1959 to 1972. The bass line on My Girl, the piano on I Heard It Through the Grapevine, the drums on Dancing in the Street, the guitar work on hundreds of records that defined an era. And the contracts they signed are the most shocking example of disposable labor in American music history. The Funk Brothers were paid per session. A flat fee, usually around $10 per song in the early years, rising modestly over time, no royalties. No songwriting credits, even when their instrumental arrangements were the most identifiable elements of the recordings. No name on the album sleeves. For more than a decade, James Jamerson, Benny Benjamin, Earl Van Dyke, Robert White, and the other members of the Motown house band created the sound that generated billions of dollars in revenue for the label. They were paid wages comparable to what a unionized factory worker would have earned for the same hours. When Motown moved its operations from Detroit to Los Angeles in 1972, the Funk Brothers were notified by a sign on the studio door. They found out their employer was leaving town from a piece of paper taped to the entrance of the building where they had recorded the soundtrack of American life. Most of them stayed in Detroit. Most of them never recovered financially. James Jamerson, whose bass playing is now considered foundational to modern popular music, died in 1983 of complications related to alcoholism, depression, and poverty. He was 47. Benny Benjamin had died years earlier of a heroin overdose. Earl Van Dyke taught school. Several of the others took jobs as janitors, security guards, factory workers. In 2002, a documentary called Standing in the Shadows of Motown finally told their story.
You were in my life, you see, 'cause you mean.
Some of the surviving members received small settlements, late recognition, lifetime achievement awards. But the structure of their original agreements meant that the music they had played, the music that still earns money every single day, generated almost nothing for them or for their families.
Longer would you be mine, baby?
Their contracts didn't ruin their lives because of malice. They ruined their lives because the agreements treated them as interchangeable laborers when they were in fact irreplaceable artists. And now, finally, the #1 entry. The contract so devastating that the artist himself once said he wished he had never signed it.
Not much longer.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and the real stories behind the music that built the world we live in. Don't miss the next one. We will see you there. Back to the countdown.
Everybody's talking.
Number 1. Michael Jackson's solo Motown contract #1. And this one you have never heard told this way, Michael Jackson. Not the Jackson 5 contract we talked about earlier. The other one.
And if you really try, you'll find there.
The solo deal Michael signed as a child, separate from his brothers, that gave Motown ownership of some of the most important recordings of his early life.
There's no need to cry in this place. You feel
And the consequences of that contract followed him into adulthood, into superstardom, and into the final years of his life when he was fighting to control his own legacy.
feel the world.
In 1971, when Michael was 13 years old, Motown signed him to an individual solo contract on top of his existing obligation to the Jackson 5.
If you care enough for living, make a better place for
He recorded Got to Be There, he recorded Ben, the song that gave him his first solo #1. He recorded Music and Me and Forever Michael.
me.
4 solo albums between 1972 and 1975, all of them produced by Motown staff, all of them built on the same publishing arrangement that governed every other artist on the label.
Feel the world. Make it a better.
Jabet owned the publishing, Motown owned the masters. The child who sang the songs received the standard artist royalty rate, calculated against recoupable expenses he had no ability to negotiate or refuse. When the Jacksons left for Epic Records in 1976, Michael's solo Motown catalog stayed behind. He couldn't take it with him. He couldn't license it. He couldn't reissue it on his own terms. And as he grew into the biggest pop star the world had ever seen, as Off the Wall became a landmark and Thriller became the best-selling album in history, his earliest solo recordings, the ones that documented his transformation from child performer to artist, remained the property of a company he had not worked with in years. Motown reissued that catalog continuously. Greatest hits packages, anniversary editions, international releases. Every time Michael's profile rose, the value of those early recordings rose with it.
Fly so high, let our spirits
And the revenue flowed to a label that had signed a 13-year-old to a contract his attorneys would later call indefensible. In the years before his death, Michael spent enormous sums trying to acquire control of music catalogs,
There's a love that cannot lie. Love is
his own and others, including the famous Beatles catalog he purchased through ATV.
strong. It only cares for joyful giving.
But the recordings he made as a child for Motown, the songs that documented his voice before it changed, before the world knew his name, those he never got back.
Our spirits never die in my heart.
He died in 2009, still not owning the first solo records he ever made. The biggest entertainer in history, and the contract he signed at 13 outlived him.
We shall see in this bliss we cannot feel.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and the real stories behind the music that built the world we live in. Don't miss the next one. We will see you there.
See, this world is heavenly. Be God's glory.
10 contracts, 10 lives bent or broken by ink on paper signed in moments of hope.
In this bliss we cannot feel. There are
The music outlived the men and women who made it. The royalties outlived the families who never received them.
and the dream we were.
And And every time you hear one of these records on the radio, remember the cost of that sound. If this story moved you, subscribe to R&B Groove, because the next one we're telling you have never heard before.